The box felt heavier than it should. It was small, wrapped in crisp, blue paper with a silver ribbon tied in a perfect bow. From across the living room, it looked like any other birthday gift. A watch, maybe, or the keys to a car. But I knew what was inside. It wasn't a gift. It was a verdict. The room buzzed with the familiar sounds of a family celebration. Laughter spilled from the kitchen where my mother, Helen, was cutting a second round of cake. My brother, David, was holding court by the fireplace, telling some exaggerated story from a recent business trip. His voice was loud and confident, the way it always was. My wife, Sarah, moved through the crowd with effortless grace, her smile lighting up the faces of our friends and neighbors. She looked beautiful. She always did. And in the center of it all was Leo, my son. 18 years old today, he was surrounded by his friends, his face flushed with happiness as he unwrapped another present. He was a good kid. More than good. He was my whole world. I taught him how to ride a bike on this very street. I coached his little league team. Even though I knew nothing about baseball, I worked 2 jobs for 3 years to make sure we could afford the down payment on this house, in this town, so he could go to the best public school in the district. Every sacrifice, every long hour, was for him. He caught my eye from across the room and grinned, holding up a new video game. I smiled back, but my smile felt like a mask, thin and brittle, ready to crack. My heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A knot of ice was forming in my stomach, cold and sharp. In my hand, the small, perfectly wrapped box was a ticking bomb, and in a few minutes, I was going to detonate it, right in the heart of my own family. Because for 18 years, I had believed Leo was my son, my blood, and the piece of paper folded neatly inside that box was the truth, a single sheet that would prove my entire life had been built on a lie. To understand the weight of that box, to understand the look in my eyes as I watched the 3 people I loved most in the world, my son, my wife, my brother, you have to see the life it was about to destroy. Our life in Maple Creek, Ohio, was a postcard. A 2-story colonial with a wide front porch, and a tire swing hanging from the big oak tree out front. We lived on a quiet, tree-lined street where kids still played kick the can in the evenings, and neighbors brought you soup when you were sick. It was the kind of life I'd always wanted. The kind of stability I'd worked my entire life to build. My day started before the sun came up. The smell of coffee brewing was my alarm clock, a ritual Sarah and I had kept since we were first married. I'd sit at the kitchen table while she packed Leo's lunch. The quiet comfort of our routine, a warm blanket against the morning chill. We didn't need to talk much. After 20 years together, silence was as comfortable as conversation. She'd hand me my travel mug, her fingers brushing against mine. A simple touch, a small smile. It was enough. I'm a construction manager. I build things. Foundations, frames, structures that are meant to last. There's an honesty to it. You follow the blueprint, you use the right materials, and you create something solid, something real. I took pride in my work. Driving through town, I could point out a dozen buildings I'd had a hand in creating. I built that. I'd tell Leo when he was little, and his eyes would go wide with awe. He thought I could build anything. For a long time, I thought so too. The best part of my day was coming home. I'd pull into the driveway and see the lights on, a warm yellow glow against the twilight. Sometimes, I'd just sit in my truck for a minute, watching. Sarah might be in the garden, tending to her roses. Leo might be shooting hoops in the driveway. The rhythmic thump 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 of the basketball a familiar soundtrack to our evenings. This was my kingdom, my safe harbor. My love for Leo was the bedrock of that kingdom. It was a physical thing, a pressure in my chest every time I looked at him. I remember the day he was born like it was yesterday. The sterile smell of the hospital, the frantic energy, and then the sudden, overwhelming quiet when the nurse placed him in my arms. He was so small, so perfect, his tiny fingers wrapped around one of mine. And in that moment, I felt a shift in my own universe. My life wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. I was the one who walked the floors with him at 3 a.m. when he was colicky, humming off-key lullabies until he finally drifted off to sleep on my shoulder. I was the one who taught him how to tie his shoes, my big, clumsy fingers struggling with the laces. I was the one who sat with him at the kitchen table for hours, patiently explaining algebra, a subject I'd barely passed myself. We weren't just father and son. We were buddies. We worked on my old pickup truck together on weekends, his smaller hands able to reach bolts that mine couldn't. We went fishing at Miller's Pond, sitting in comfortable silence for hours, waiting for a bite that rarely came. We didn't care. It was never about the fish. He had Sarah's bright, intelligent eyes, but I always thought he had my stubborn jaw. He had my quiet way of observing things before speaking. When he'd get frustrated with a problem, he'd go silent and pace, just like I do. I saw myself in him every single day. A better, smarter, more promising version of me. He was my legacy. And then there was David, my older brother. David was the star of the Miller family. He was the handsome one, the charming one, the one who had gotten a business degree and now made a six-figure salary as a sales executive. He had a flashy car, a tailored suit for every occasion, and a story that could make anyone laugh. When David walked into a room, the energy shifted. He was magnetic. Growing up, I lived in his shadow. He was the captain of the football team. I was on the debate team. He was the one who always had a girlfriend. I was the one who spent Friday nights reading sci-fi novels. But I was never jealous of him. I was proud. He was my brother. When I started dating Sarah in college, she and David hit it off immediately. It was like they spoke the same language. They shared a love for sarcastic humor and old movies. They could argue about politics for hours and end up laughing. I loved it. I loved that the two most important people in my life got along so well. They were best friends. That's what everyone said. That's what I said. Their closeness was a constant, a normal feature of our family landscape. David was at our house at least twice a week. He never missed a family dinner, a holiday, or a birthday. He was Uncle David, the fun uncle, the one who always brought the coolest presents for Leo. He'd toss a football with him in the yard, offer him advice about girls, and slip him a $20 bill when he thought Sarah and I weren't looking. He and Sarah had their rituals. A standing coffee date on the first Saturday of every month. Long phone calls that were full of inside jokes and laughter I couldn't quite decipher. If I ever felt a flicker of something, a tiny, unnamed discomfort, I would crush it immediately. This was Sarah, my loyal, loving wife. This was David, my brother. To suspect anything between them would have been insane. It would have been an insult to everything we had built. So I smiled through it all. I laughed at their jokes. I listened to their stories. I watched them, year after year, sharing a bond that I was a part of, but never truly inside. I was a sturdy, reliable bridge that connected them, the foundation they both stood upon. I never once thought that the foundation itself might be nothing but sand. I remember one summer afternoon, a few years back, we were having a barbecue in the backyard. The air was thick with the smell of grilled hot dogs and freshly cut grass. David and Sarah were at the patio table, heads close together, looking at something on her phone. They were laughing. A private, shared joy. Leo, who was about 15 at the time, was trying to show me a new trick he'd learned on his skateboard. I was watching him, my heart swelling with pride, but my gaze kept drifting back to the patio table. David put his hand on Sarah's arm. A casual, familiar gesture. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it. Just for a second. It was nothing. A fleeting moment. A trick of the summer heat. Maybe. But I remember it. The memory was a tiny splinter, buried so deep I had forgotten it was there. But lies have a way of working their way to the surface. And for the past few months, that splinter had been pressing, causing an ache I could no longer ignore. It started with small things. A glance held too long. A whispered conversation that stopped the moment I entered the room. A defensiveness in Sarah's voice when I asked a simple question. My world, once so solid and certain, had started to feel like a set piece. A beautifully constructed facade designed to keep me from seeing the rot underneath. I had spent my life building things to last. I just never imagined that my own family was the one thing that was designed to break, and that the person holding the sledgehammer would be me. The change was subtle at first, like the slow turning of seasons. A slight chill in the air of a room that was once warm. It started about 6 months before Leo's 18th birthday. It began with a phone call. I came home from work, my boots heavy with concrete dust, and heard Sarah's voice from the living room. It was hushed, urgent, the way you talk when you don't want to be overheard. I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the doorframe. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. It was my house. She was my wife, but something in her tone made me freeze. You can't just show up like that, David, she whispered. There was a pause. I could hear the faint, tinny murmur of my brother's voice on the other end. No. I don't care what the reason was. We have to be more careful. He's not stupid. My blood went cold. He's not stupid. Was she talking about me? Or Leo? She must have heard the floorboards creak, because her voice instantly changed, becoming bright and casual. Oh, that's great. Yeah. I'll tell him. Talk soon. Bye. She hung up and turned, a startled but perfectly composed smile on her face. Mike, you're home early. Traffic was light, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally flat. Who was that? Just David, she said, waving a dismissive hand. He was thinking of swinging by, but I told him we had plans. We don't have plans, I said. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she smoothed it over. Well, I was going to make that lasagna you like. I just wanted a quiet night. You know. She came over and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were cool. Don't be silly. You look tired. Go get changed. I let it go. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She wanted a quiet night. My brother wanted to visit. What was so suspicious about that? But the phrase echoed in my mind for days. We have to be more careful. He's not stupid. Careful about what? That was the first splinter. After that, I started noticing more. Their monthly coffee dates seemed to become more frequent. Sometimes, I'd come home and she'd mention, a little too casually, that she and David had grabbed lunch. We just had so much to catch up on. She'd say, what could two people who saw each other every week possibly have to catch up on? Then there was the money. I handle our finances. It's just how we've always done it. I noticed a pattern of small cash withdrawals from our joint account. $50 here, $100 there. It wasn't enough to cause alarm, but it was steady. When I asked her about it, she got defensive. It's for groceries. Mike, for things for the house. Do I need to provide a receipt for every dollar I spend? No, of course not, I said, backing down. I just didn't recognize the ATM location. It was near that new boutique downtown. I stopped in after a doctor's appointment. She said quickly. Too quickly. The explanation was flawless, but it felt rehearsed. I started looking at Leo differently. I'd search his face for traces of my own. For years, I'd been proud of the resemblances I saw. My quiet nature, my stubborn chin. But now, my gaze was poisoned by doubt. I started seeing things I'd never seen before. Or maybe, things I had refused to see. One evening, David was over for dinner. He and Leo were laughing about something, and Leo threw his head back, his mouth open in a wide, unrestrained grin. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. It was David's smile. The exact same shape. The same crinkle around the eyes. I had seen my brother smile that way 1,000 times. I had never realized I was seeing it on my son's face every single day. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I saw David in the way Leo ran his hands through his hair when he was frustrated. I saw David in the confident, easy way he carried himself. These were things I'd once admired as signs of Leo's own unique personality. Now they felt like clues to a crime I hadn't even known was committed. The doubt became a constant companion, a low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of my life. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Every conversation was a test. Every laugh felt forced. The easy comfort Sarah and I had shared for 2 decades was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile silence. I was walking on eggshells, terrified of what I might find if I pressed too hard, but even more terrified of not knowing the truth. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October, 3 months before the birthday party. I had a site inspection that was cancelled at the last minute, so I came home in the middle of the afternoon. The house was quiet. I assumed no one was home. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and that's when I heard them. They were in the sunroom, the one place in the house where the acoustics are strange, where voices carry. It was Sarah's voice, tied with a panic I had never heard from her before. He keeps looking at him, at Leo. I see the way he watches him now. He's comparing. David's voice was low, trying to be soothing. Sarah, calm down. You're being paranoid. Mike's not. Don't tell me I'm being paranoid, she hissed. Last night, my own mother said Leo is starting to look more and more like you. She said it right in front of him. David. Right in front of Mike. I thought he was going to be sick. There was a long silence. I stood frozen, my hand gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body felt numb. Then David spoke, and his words were the final hammer blow that shattered my world. It's been 18 years. Sarah, we've been careful. We just have to hold on. After he leaves for college, it'll be easier. We just have to get through this. It's been 18 years. The number slammed into me. 18 years. Leo's entire life. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything. I turned around, as quiet as a ghost, and walked back out of the house. I got in my truck and drove, with no destination in mind. The neat, tidy streets of Maple Creek blurred past my window. The perfect houses with their perfect lawns looked like a movie set. A lie. Everything was a lie. My brother, my wife, the two people I trusted most in the world. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had built my entire life for me. My beautiful, perfect life. And it was all a cage designed to hold their secret. Leo wasn't the foundation of my life. He was the lock on my prison cell. That night, I went online. My fingers felt like clumsy, foreign objects as I typed paternity test into the search bar. Ordering the kit was a cold, clinical act. I used a credit card David wouldn't see and had the package sent to my office. When it arrived in a plain brown box, it felt like I was holding a weapon. Getting this sample was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It felt like a violation, a betrayal of the son I loved more than life itself. I waited until Leo was asleep. I crept into his room, the same room where I'd read him bedtime stories and chased away monsters from under the bed. The moonlight fell across his face. He looked so young, so innocent. He was the only innocent one in all of this. My heart hammered in my chest. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a massive, paranoid delusion? I could still stop. I could throw the kid away and choose to live in the comfortable ignorance I'd inhabited for 18 years. But I couldn't. I had heard their words. It's been 18 years. I had to know. His toothbrush was in the holder by his sink. My hand trembled as I picked it up. I carefully swabbed the inside of my own cheek, my mouth dry with shame and adrenaline. Then, I took his toothbrush and gently scraped the bristles into the second collection envelope. It was done. The next morning, I mailed the package from a post office in the next town over. Then, the waiting began. It was 3 weeks of purgatory. 3 weeks of living inside the lie, of playing the part of the happy husband and proud father. Every meal was torture. Every family gathering was a fresh hell. I'd watched Sarah and David, looking for signs. Now they were everywhere. The shared glances, the private smiles, the way they stood a little too close to each other. How had I been so blind? I threw myself into planning Leo's 18th birthday party. Sarah thought my sudden enthusiasm was a good sign, that I was finally shaking off a strange mood that had clung to me for months. She had no idea. I wasn't planning a celebration. I was setting a stage. I was building the platform from which I would execute my own family. The email arrived on a Friday afternoon. I was at my desk at the office, staring blankly at a set of blueprints. The subject line was simple: "Your results are ready." I clicked the link. I entered the password, and I waited for the page to load. For a split second, I prayed I was wrong. I prayed for a miracle. I prayed for this nightmare to be over. But there are no miracles for men like me. The words were stark and clinical, just data on a screen. But they screamed at me. Subject: Michael Miller. Subject: Leo Miller. Probability of paternity: 0%. 0. Not 1%. Not 0. 1%. 0. I stared at the screen for a long time. The buzzing in the office, the ringing phones, the voices of my coworkers that all faded away into a dull roar. The world I had built, the life I had loved, the man I thought I was, all of it crumbled into dust around me. There was nothing left but a cold, hollow emptiness and one single, burning thought: they would not get away with it. I printed the results, my hand steady now. The rage had burned away the shock and the grief, leaving something hard and sharp in its place. I folded the paper carefully and went to a gift shop on my way home. I bought a small, handsome box and the prettiest wrapping paper I could find. I was a builder, after all, and I was about to bring the whole house down. The days leading up to the party were surreal. I moved through my life like a ghost, an actor playing a part one had known for 20 years, but whose lines suddenly felt foreign in my mouth. I went to work. I discussed blueprints and delivery schedules. I came home. I asked Sarah about her day. I talked to Leo about his college applications. I did all the normal things a husband and a father does. But I was hollow inside. The real me, the one who had his heart ripped out by a single line of text, was standing in the corner of the room, watching the performance with a cold, detached curiosity. My grief had curdled into a quiet, simmering rage. It was a constant heat at the back of my neck. It was the pressure behind my eyes. I watched Sarah and David with a new clarity. I saw their betrayal in every gesture, every word. The easy intimacy that I had once found so endearing now looked like a vulgar display of their long-running deceit. One evening, David came over to drop something off. He and Sarah stood in the kitchen, their backs to me, talking in low tones. I was in the dining room, pretending to read the newspaper. "Are you sure you're okay?" David asked her, his voice laced with concern. "You seem on edge." "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was brittle. "It's just, Mike's been so quiet lately. And this party for Leo. He's obsessed with it. He wants everything to be perfect. It's not like him. Maybe he's just proud." David offered. "Leo's a great kid. We did a good job." The word twisted in my gut. We did a good job. The audacity of it stole my breath. They weren't just liars. They were proud of their lie. They looked at Leo, my son boy I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I had soothed. They saw their shared success, a project they had managed together. I folded the newspaper with a sharp crackle. They both turned, startled. "Everything all right, Mike?" David asked, his charming smile snapping into place. "Never better," I said, my own smile feeling like a grimace. Just looking forward to celebrating my son. "It's not every day your boy turns 18. I emphasized the words "my son," letting them hang in the air. A flicker of something fear, guilt, crossed Sarah's face before it was gone. David just clapped me on the shoulder. "You've been a great father to him, Mike. The best." The hypocrisy was so profound, so absolute. It was almost impressive. It took a special kind of monster to look a man in the eye and praise him for raising your own secret child. In the final week before the party, I became an automaton of preparation. I ordered the cake, a 3-layer chocolate monstrosity with "Happy 18th, Leo" written in bright blue icing. I picked up the balloons. I made a playlist of all of Leo's favorite songs from over the years, a soundtrack to a life that wasn't mine. Each task was a stone I was laying on the path to destruction. Each balloon I blew up felt like I was filling it with poison. Sarah watched me with a mixture of confusion and relief. I think she believed I was finally coming out of my funk. She thought my focus on the party was a sign of my love for Leo, a reaffirmation of our family. She had no idea it was the exact opposite. It was a meticulously planned demolition. My best friend, Frank, a fellow foreman from my company, noticed the change in me. We'd known each other for 15 years. We grabbed beers after work most Fridays, a ritual that had saved my sanity more than once. "You're wound tight as a drum, Mike," he said, sliding a beer across the table to me at our usual spot. "Something's going on." "Is it, Sarah?" I took a long drink, the cold beer doing nothing to cool the fire in my chest. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to unload the whole ugly, sordid story. I wanted to see the shock and disgust on his face, to have someone else validate my rage. But I couldn't. The secret was mine to keep, and mine to detonate. Just stressed. I mumbled. "Big project at work. And Leo's party is this weekend. You're still coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," he said. But he was watching me with a worried expression. "You know, if you ever need to talk, I'm fine." Frank. Really? I lied to my best friend, just as my wife and brother had lied to me. The poison was spreading. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Sarah, her steady breathing a sound that had brought me comfort for 20 years. Now, it was the rhythm of my betrayal. I stared at the ceiling, replaying my life in my head. Every memory was now tainted, viewed through the lens of the truth. The day Leo took his first steps, he toddled from Sarah's arms straight into mine. Had she been looking at David, who was standing right behind me, a proud smile on his face? The time Leo got the lead in the school play, I'd helped him run his lines for weeks. Was the pride in Sarah's eyes for me? Or for the man sitting next to her in the audience? The man who shared Leo's natural charisma. Every Christmas morning, every birthday, every family vacation. They were all scenes from a play. And I was the only one who didn't know his part was a sham. The love I felt, the pride, the joy, it was all real for me. But what was it for them? A joke? A convenience? A price they were willing to pay to keep their comfortable lives intact? I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. The house was dark and quiet. The gifts for Leo were piled on the dining room table. A new laptop from my mother, a stack of clothes from Sarah, a set of expensive golf clubs from Uncle David. My gift sat apart from the others. The small, blue box. It looked so innocent. I walked into Leo's room. He was fast asleep, one arm thrown over his head. He looked so much like he did when he was a little boy. I could almost see the 5-year-old who used to climb into our bed after a bad dream. His small body warm and trusting against mine. A wave of love, so powerful and so painful it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. This was my son. Blood didn't make a father. I knew that. 18 years of love and sacrifice made a father. Waking up in the middle of the night, holding his hand at the doctor's office, cheering for him on the sidelines until my voice was raw. That's what made a father. I was his father in every way that mattered. So why was I doing this? For a fleeting moment, I considered another path. I could take the box. I could burn it. I could walk away from the truth and continue living the lie. I could keep my son. I could keep the peace. I could swallow the poison and let it eat me from the inside out. But our family, our beautiful, fragile family, would survive? But then I thought of them. I thought of Sarah's cool kiss on my cheek. I thought of David's hand on my shoulder, his voice calling me the best father. I thought of their whispers, their secrets, their shared history that excluded me. That was built on my ignorance. They had made a fool of me for 18 years. They had stolen the most fundamental truth of my life. My love for Leo was real. But the rage I felt was real, too. And it demanded to be heard. They didn't deserve my silence. They didn't deserve to get away with it. And Leo? He deserved the truth. Didn't he? Even if the truth would shatter him. Wasn't a painful truth better than a comfortable lie? I didn't know. I didn't know the answer. I only knew that I couldn't carry the secret alone anymore. I went back to the dining room and picked out the small, blue box. The decision was made. There was no turning back. Tomorrow, I would give my son the truth, and it would either set us all free, or it would burn us all to the ground. I wasn't sure I cared which. The day of the party dawned bright and clear. A perfect late winter afternoon in Ohio. The kind of day that holds the false promise of spring. Our house, which usually felt like a sanctuary, today felt like a stage. Every guest who arrived, every cheerful happy birthday, Leo, that echoed through the rooms, was another member of the audience taking their seat for the final act. I was a gracious host. I smiled. I shook hands. I accepted compliments on how wonderful the house looked. Sarah was glowing, moving through the party like a queen in her court. She'd occasionally catch my eye and give me a warm, appreciative smile. A look that said, "Thank you for doing this. For us. For Leo." Each smile was a new twist of the knife. David arrived, fashionably late as always, bearing a ridiculously large gift bag. He greeted me with a one-armed hug. "Mike, place looks great. You outdid yourself. Only the best for my son," I replied, my voice even. I looked him straight in the eye. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow of unease in his confident gaze, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He was a professional. He'd been playing this role for a long time. He found Sarah immediately. Of course. They stood near the kitchen, their heads together. They looked so natural, so comfortable. A handsome couple. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly see it. They made sense together in a way that Sarah and I never had. He was the sun. She was a flower that bloomed in his light. I was just the quiet, sturdy pot that held the soil. I watched Leo. He was the happiest I had ever seen him. He was surrounded by everyone who loved him. His friends, his grandparents, his aunt and uncle, his parents. He moved through the crowd with an easy confidence, his laughter filling the house. He was on the cusp of everything. Adulthood, college, a future that seemed limitless. And I was about to take a sledgehammer to all of it. A wave of nausea rolled over me. Was this justice? Or was it just cruelty? My mother, Helen, pulled me aside. Her face was beaming. "Oh, Michael, just look at this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at the family you've built. Your father would be so proud." She squeezed my arm. "And Leo, he's the best of all of us. The best of you and the best of David. All rolled into one." She meant it as the highest compliment. The best of the Miller brothers. For years, I had heard variations of that sentiment. Leo has your quiet determination, Mike, but he has David's charm. I had always just smiled and nodded. But today, her words landed like a physical blow. The irony was so thick, So suffocating. I could barely breathe. Thanks, Mom. I managed to choke out. The time came to open the presents. This was a moment I had been planning for, rehearsing in my mind for weeks. The guests gathered in the living room, forming a loose circle around Leo, who sat on the floor like a king on his throne, surrounded by a mountain of brightly wrapped packages. He opened gift after gift. The laptop from my mother, the golf clubs from David, who made a loud, ostentatious show of explaining all their features. The pile of clothes from Sarah. With each one, Leo was gracious and genuinely thrilled. Then, he looked at me. Your turn. Dad, where's yours? You've been hiding it. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to me. Sarah smiled at me. A soft, encouraging look. David leaned against the fireplace, a benevolent uncle watching the proceedings. My mother looked at me with pure, unadulterated love. I felt a tremor in my hands as I walked to the dining room table and picked out the small blue box. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Every step I took felt heavy. Deliberate. This was it. The point of no return. I walked back into the living room and stood in front of Leo. I looked down at his face, so open and full of trust. His whole life, he had looked at me with that same trust, and I was about to betray it in the most public way imaginable. The part of me that was still a father, the part that hadn't been consumed by rage, screamed at me to stop. Don't do it. Don't destroy him. But then I looked up and saw them. Sarah, my wife, her expression a perfect blend of wifely affection. David, my brother, with his proprietary smirk. They were watching the show, their show, and I knew I couldn't stop. Happy birthday, son, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I handed him the box. He took it, a curious smile on his face. It's small. Is it a watch? Something like that, I said. It's something that will help you understand time. The past, specifically. A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Leo began to unwrap it, his fingers tearing at the blue paper. Sarah shifted on her feet, a small, nervous frown appearing on her face. She knew my moods. She knew something was wrong. David, however, remained oblivious, still smiling his movie star smile. Leo lifted the lid off the box. He reached inside and pulled out the folded-up piece of paper. He looked at it, confused. It wasn't a gift certificate. It wasn't a check. It was a formal document. What is this? He asked, his eyes scanning the page. Genetic test results? The air in the room became thick and heavy. The smiles on people's faces began to fade. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, wide with dawning horror. I didn't look at her. I kept my gaze fixed on Leo. He continued to read, his brow furrowed in concentration. And then his face changed. The color drained from it. His mouth fell slightly open. He looked up from the paper, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. He looked at me, then at my mother, then at Sarah, and then his eyes locked on David. What does this mean? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Probability of paternity, 0%. He looked back at me, his face a mask of utter confusion and fear. Dad, what is this? I took a deep breath. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. This was my stage. This was my moment. It means I'm not your father. Leo, I said, my voice clear and cold, cutting through the silence. I've loved you and raised you as my own for 18 years. But I am not your biological father. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. Frank just stared at me, his face pale with shock. Leo just kept staring at me, shaking his head slowly, as if he could physically deny the words. No, that's not true. It's a joke. It's a sick joke. It's not a joke, I said, my voice hardening. I finally turned my gaze to Sarah. Her face was as white as a sheet. She looked like she was going to collapse. And then I looked at David. The charming smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. If I'm not your son, Leo's voice cracked. He looked down at the paper again, then back up. He followed my gaze, first to his mother, then to his uncle. A horrible, dawning understanding began to spread across his young face. It was the most terrible thing I had ever seen. The moment a child's world breaks. Then who is? He whispered. I didn't have to answer. I just held my brother's terrified gaze. And in the crushing silence of that room, surrounded by the ruins of our lives. Everyone finally understood the truth. The silence that followed my words was a living thing. It was heavy and suffocating, pressing in on all of us. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if I had pressed a pause button on reality, freezing everyone in a tableau of horror. Then, the first sound. It was a choked sob from my mother. "Helen! Michael! No!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What have you done?" But my attention wasn't on her. It was on the triangle of betrayal at the heart of the room. Sarah was staring at me, her face a mess of disbelief and terror. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. David, my brother, the man who always had a quick line and an easy smile, was frozen by the fireplace. His face, usually so tan and confident, was a sickly, grayish color. He looked trapped, a cornered animal realizing the hunter had been standing behind him the entire time. And Leo, he was still on the floor, the crumpled paper clutched in his hand. The initial shock on his face was beginning to morph into something else. A deep, gut-wrenching pain. He looked back and forth between Sarah and David, his eyes begging for a denial, for someone to tell him this was all a terrible mistake. "Mom," he said, his voice small and broken. "Mom, say something." Sarah finally found her voice. It was a ragged whisper. "Mike, how could you? How could you do this to him? To us? To us?" I let out a short, harsh laugh that held no humor. "There is no us, Sarah. There hasn't been for a long time. Has there? Maybe there never was." I took a step forward, my voice dropping, but laced with the venom I'd held back for so long. "Tell me, how long has it been? 20 years? Longer? When did you and my brother decide to build my entire life on a foundation of your lies?" Every word was a blow. I saw her flinch. The guests, our friends and neighbors, started to back away, trying to make themselves invisible. They were shifting their feet, looking at the door, desperate to escape the blast radius of our exploding family. David finally moved. He took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mike, listen. We need to talk about this. Privately. This isn't the time or the place." "Not the time?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've had 18 years of time, David. 18 years of playing the fun uncle while I raised your son. You came into my house. You ate at my table. You called me your brother, all while knowing you had betrayed me in the most fundamental way a man can be betrayed. I love you, Mike," he said, his voice cracking. "You're my brother. Don't you dare say that to me." I snarled. The rage I had been carefully controlling was finally boiling over. A brother doesn't do this. A brother doesn't poison your life from the inside out. It was then that Leo finally broke. He scrambled to his feet, his face streaked with tears. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at David. "Is it true?" he yelled, his voice cracking with adolescent fury and pain. "Are you my father?" David couldn't meet his eyes. He looked at Sarah, a desperate, silent plea. But Sarah was crumbling, her hands covering her face as she began to sob uncontrollably. "Answer me," Leo screamed, taking a step towards David. The boy I knew, the calm, easygoing kid, was gone. In his place was a stranger, his face contorted with a pain so raw it was hard to look at. David finally looked at him, his own eyes filled with tears. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, and the world fell apart. Leo let out a sound that was not a word, but a pure expression of agony. It was a howl of a wounded animal. He turned and shoved his way through the stunned crowd of his friends, who stood frozen with horror. He threw open the front door and ran out into the cold afternoon, slamming the door behind him with a force that shook the entire house. The slam of the door broke the spell. The room erupted into chaos. "Leo!" Sarah shrieked, finally snapping out of her stupor. She ran for the door, pulling it open and screaming his name into the empty street. My mother, Helen, was now openly weeping, held up by one of her friends. "My family," she kept murmuring over and over. "My beautiful family." Frank, my best friend, came to my side. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Mike, Jesus Christ." He wasn't judging me. He was just in shock, trying to process the devastation. I barely felt his touch. My eyes were locked on David. The last of my restraint was gone. All the years of feeling second best, all the quiet insecurities, all the pain of the last few months, It all coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. I walked towards him. He backed away, stumbling against the brick of the fireplace. "You coward!" I spat. "You couldn't even tell him. You couldn't even give him that. You let him live a lie. And then you let me be the one to burn his world down. You are the most pathetic excuse for a man I have ever known. I never wanted to hurt you." He stammered, his voice weak. "I loved her. I've always loved her." The confession, so simple and so devastating, hung in the air. He had loved her, and I was just in the way. And what about me? I was standing right in front of him now, my face inches from his. "Did you ever love me? Your brother?" He looked at me then, and in his tear-filled eyes, I saw the pathetic truth. He was weak. He had always been weak, hiding behind his charm and his money. He took what he wanted and let others deal with the consequences. I didn't hit him. It was a conscious choice. Hitting him would have been too easy, a release that he didn't deserve. Instead, I just looked at him with all the contempt I felt. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Get out of my house." He didn't need to be told twice. He practically scrambled over the furniture to get to the door, not even looking back at Sarah, who was still standing on the porch, crying out Leo's name. The guests were already fleeing, murmuring apologies, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. They didn't want to be tainted by our tragedy. In less than 5 minutes, the house that had been filled with laughter and music was almost empty. Only a few remained. Frank, who stood by me, a silent, solid presence. My mother, who was now sitting on the couch, staring blankly into the fire, her face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And Sarah. She came back inside, closing the door softly. The fight had gone out of her. She looked utterly defeated. She wouldn't look at me. "He's gone," she said to the floor. I called his phone. "He's not picking up. Give him some space," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. She finally looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Do you hate me, Mike?" I considered the question. Hate was a hot, passionate emotion. What I felt for her now was something colder, something emptier. It was the feeling you get when you look at the rubble of a building you spent your life constructing. It wasn't hatred. It was just nothing. "I don't know what I feel, Sarah," I said, and it was the honest truth. "But I know that I am looking at a stranger. My home is a crime scene. And my son, the boy I love more than anything, is gone because of you." I turned and walked past her, heading for the stairs. I needed to get away. I needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with the stench of betrayal. "Where are you going?" she asked, a note of panic in her voice. "I'm going to pack a bag," I said, not looking back. "I can't stay here tonight." I couldn't stay there ever again. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a monument to a lie. And as I walked up the stairs, the sound of my wife's weeping and my mother's silent grief followed me like a shroud. I had gotten my truth. I had gotten my revenge. And I had never felt more alone in my entire life. The silence in the upstairs hallway was a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage downstairs. This was the heart of our family life, closed doors of our bedrooms, the framed photos on the wall, a picture of Leo at his first communion, me with my arm around his shoulder, both of us in ill-fitting suits, a family portrait from 5 years ago, all of us smiling on a beach in North Carolina. Lies. Every single one of them a beautifully framed lie. I walked past Leo's room. The door was ajar. His scented mix of teenage boy, laundry detergent, and some kind of citrus body wash lingered in the air. On his desk, a pile of college brochures was stacked neatly. University of Michigan, Ohio State. He was supposed to be deciding his future. Instead, his past had just been rewritten, and his present had been obliterated. The guilt, which had been overshadowed by my rage, came rushing back. A cold, sickening tide. I had done this. In my quest for my own justice, I had placed the heaviest burden of all on his shoulders. I went into the master bedroom, the room I had shared with Sarah for 2 decades. It felt alien to me now. Her perfume hung in the air. Her books were stacked on the nightstand. The bed, with its rumpled comforter, was a stage for an intimacy that had been a performance. I opened my closet and pulled out a duffel bag. My hands moved mechanically, pulling shirts from hangers, grabbing socks and underwear from drawers. I wasn't thinking, just acting. A body executing a pre-programmed command, escape. What was I even doing? Where would I go? A motel? Frank's place? The questions felt distant, unimportant. The only thing that mattered was putting distance between myself and this house, between myself and the woman downstairs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping it was Leo. It was a text from Frank. "Are you okay? Where are you?" I typed a quick reply. "Packing a bag. Need to get out of here. Don't know where I'm going." His reply came instantly. "Go to the site, the Franklin building. I'll leave the trailer unlocked for you. There's a cot in the heater. It's not much, but it's quiet. I'll bring you some stuff later." Relief washed over me. A place to go. A concrete destination. The construction site. My world. The place where things were simple. Where blueprints made sense and structures were honest. I zipped the duffel bag and turned to leave. Sarah was standing in the doorway. She had stopped crying. Her face was pale and blotchy, but her expression was strangely calm. "Resigned. You're really leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "I can't be here," I said. "I look at you, and I see him. I see 18 years of you looking at me and seeing a fool." "That's not true," she whispered. "I did love you, Mike. A part of me will always love you. You were my rock. You were my safe place. A safe place to hide your secrets," I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. "I wasn't your husband, Sarah. I was your alibi." Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she would start crying again. But she held it together. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was one night. A stupid, terrible mistake. I was young, and I was scared. David and we had a history before you and I even met. That night, we were all drinking after a party. You passed out on the couch. It just happened. Her confession was a pathetic, flimsy excuse. A story meant to minimize the damage. One night. As if that one night hadn't cast a shadow over our entire lives. "And then you found out you were pregnant," I said, filling in the blanks. "And you were too scared to tell me the truth. So you let me believe he was mine. You let my brother stand as my best man at our wedding, knowing he was the father of the child in your belly. And you kept that lie going. Every single day. For 570 days. Sarah." I counted. The specificity of the number seemed to shock her more than anything else. She finally understood the depth of my obsession. The poison that had been eating away at me. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice weak. "So many times. I almost told you. But then I'd see you with him. I'd see the way you looked at him. The love in your eyes. You were a better father than David ever could have been. He didn't want the responsibility. He was relieved. And you were so happy. I couldn't take that away from you. I couldn't take you away from him. So you made the choice for me," I said. "You decided that a happy lie was better than a painful truth. But it wasn't your choice to make." I brushed past her, the duffel bag bumping against the doorframe. "It was never your choice to make." I walked down the stairs. My mother was still on the couch, but she stood up as I approached. Her face was etched with a profound sadness I had never seen. "Where is he, Michael?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Where is my grandson?" "I don't know, Mom," I said, my voice softening for the first time. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry," she said, her voice rising with a sudden, fierce anger. "You're sorry. You did this. You blew up your family out of spite. Yes, they were wrong. What they did was a terrible, terrible sin. But Leo is innocent, and you chose to hurt him, to humiliate him in front of everyone, just to punish them. What kind of love is that?" Her words hit me harder than any accusation from Sarah or David, because they were true. My pain, my righteous anger, had blinded me. I had used my son as a weapon. I had taken his heart and used it to stab his mother and the man who was his biological father. In my crusade for the truth, I had forgotten who the real victim was. "I need to go," I mumbled, unable to meet her gaze. I walked out the front door, the same door Leo had slammed just an hour earlier. The cold air hit my face, a welcome shock. The street was quiet again. The neighbors' curtains were drawn. The party was over. I got in my truck and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the house. My house. The big oak tree with the tire swing. The porch where Sarah and I had coffee. The driveway where I taught Leo to shoot hoops. It all looked the same. But it was a hollow shell. A tombstone for a life that was now dead. I drove through the streets of Maple Creek. The town that had been my home for my entire adult life. Everything looked different. Tainted. I saw ghosts everywhere. A younger me pushing a stroller. A little boy on a bike with training wheels. His face a mixture of terror and glee. A family walking home from the ice cream shop on a summer night. My rage was gone now. It had burned itself out, leaving behind a vast, empty landscape of grief and regret. My mother was right. I had punished them. Yes, I had exposed their lie for all to see. But at what cost? I had lost everything. My wife, my brother, my home, my mother's respect, and my son. I had destroyed his world, his identity, his sense of self. And for what? For my own pride? For a truth that served no one but my own wounded ego? I finally reached the construction site on the edge of town. It was dark and deserted. I pulled up to the trailer Frank had mentioned and killed the engine. The silence was absolute. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring out at the skeletal frame of the new Franklin building rising against the night sky. A structure that was honest and true, built on a solid foundation. Everything my life wasn't. I put my head on the steering wheel, and for the first time since I'd received that email, I cried. Not for myself. Not for the betrayal or the lies. I cried for the boy. The innocent boy who was out there somewhere, alone in the dark, his entire world shattered by the one man he had always trusted to protect him. The construction trailer was cold and smelled of stale coffee and sawdust. It was a sterile, impersonal space, a world away from the warmth of the home I had left behind. Frank had been true to his word. A dusty cot was set up in the corner with a sleeping bag and a pillow. An old electric heater hummed weakly, casting a pale orange glow on the metal walls. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor. The thud echoed in the small space. This was my life now. A cot in a box on a patch of dirt. I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the blueprints tacked to the wall. Lines, angles, measurements. A logical world where everything fit together as it should. I tried to focus on them, to lose myself in the familiar comfort of work. But my mind was a chaotic storm. My mother's words played on a loop. You chose to hurt him. What kind of love is that? She was right. My quest for vengeance had been a selfish one. I had been so consumed by my own pain, my own sense of betrayal, that I hadn't truly considered the fallout. I had imagined a moment of pure, righteous victory. I had pictured the looks of shame on Sarah's and David's faces. I had gotten that. But I had never fully pictured the look on Leo's. The utter devastation. The shattering of his reality. That image was now seared into my brain. My phone buzzed again. It was Frank. Brought you some things. Left them outside the door. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Mike. I didn't have the energy to respond. A few minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel as he drove away. I opened the trailer door. On the steps was a plastic bag with a toothbrush, a bottle of water, and a sandwich wrapped in foil. Friendship in its purest form. Simple, solid, and asking for nothing in return. It was a kindness I felt I didn't deserve. I spent the next 2 days in that trailer. A self-imposed exile. The hours bled together. I didn't answer my phone, which rang constantly with calls from Sarah, from my mother, from numbers I didn't recognize. Each ring felt like an accusation. I let them all go to voicemail. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face anyone. I thought about Leo constantly. Where was he? Was he safe? Was he with friends? Or was he alone, trying to make sense of the wreckage I had created? I scrolled through the pictures on my phone. Hundreds of them. Leo was a baby, chubby and smiling. Leo on his first day of school, his backpack almost bigger than he was. Leo grinning, holding up a fishing trophy we'd won. In every photo, he was looking at me with love and trust. What did he feel for me now? Hatred? Contempt? Or just a vast, empty space where a father used to be? On the third morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. My voice was a hoarse croak. There was a pause. Then, a voice I barely recognized. It's Leo. My heart leaped into my throat. I sat up straight, gripping the phone. Leo. Oh my God. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm fine, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. I'm at a friend's house. Matt's. His parents are cool with it. Thank God. I breathed. A wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy. Leo, I am so sorry. For how I did it. For everything. Are you? He asked. His voice cold. Sorry you did it. Or just sorry you got the reaction you wanted. The question was a punch to the gut. No. Leo. That's not. I was hurt. I was so angry. I wasn't thinking straight. You seem to be thinking pretty straight to me. He said. You planned it. The box. The wrapping paper. The big reveal in front of everyone. That took thought. Didn't it? I had no defense. He was right. It was calculated. It was cruel. Yes. I whispered. Shame washing over me. It was. And it was the worst mistake of my life. Hurting you was never what I wanted. But you did. He said simply. There was another long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. I waited. Desperate for him to say more. To yell at me. To cry anything but this cold. Dead silence. I need to see you. He said finally. My heart surged with a desperate hope. Yes. Of course. Anything. Where? I'll come right now. Not at the house. He said quickly. And not. Wherever you are. Someplace else. Neutral. He thought for a moment. The park. By the duck pond. In an hour. I'll be there. I said. He hung up without saying goodbye. The drive to the park was the longest of my life. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. What would I say? How could I possibly fix this? I knew I couldn't. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together again. All I could do was show up and face the consequences of my actions. I saw him from a distance. He was sitting on a park bench, the same one where I had once helped him feed stale bread to the ducks when he was a little boy. He was wearing a hoodie. The hood pulled up over his head. Even though the day wasn't particularly cold, he looked smaller somehow, hunched over. His shoulders slumped. I parked the truck and walked towards him, my feet feeling like lead. He didn't look up as I approached. I stood in front of the bench for a moment, unsure of what to do. Finally, I sat down on the other end, leaving a careful distance between us. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the ducks glide across the murky water. The silence wasn't comfortable. Like our old fishing trips, it was a tense, painful void, filled with all the things we couldn't say. He was the first to speak, his voice low, still not looking at me. I talked to him. I knew who him was. David. He nodded. He came to Matt's house. Mom told him where I was. He tried to explain. He cried. He said he was sorry. He said he always loved me from a distance. What did you say? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. I told him to leave. Leo said. I told him he had no right. He's not my father. He's a guy who shares my DNA. That's it. A tiny, selfish part of me felt a flicker of relief, but it was quickly extinguished by the look on Leo's face as he finally turned to me. His eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a weary pain that no 18-year-old should ever have to know. You're my dad, he said, and the words were like a physical blow. You were. You taught me how to throw a baseball. You helped me with my homework. You stayed up with me all night when I had that horrible flu in 10th grade. He didn't do any of that. You did. Tears welled in my eyes. I know. Leo, I'm still that guy. I still love you more than anything. Do you? He shot back, a flash of the old anger returning. Because it feels like you hate them more than you love me. It feels like you used me. My life. My identity. It was just a bomb you could use to blow them up. And you didn't care that I was standing right next to it. I couldn't deny it. I could only hang my head in shame. You're right, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. I was so blinded by my own pain. I didn't see yours. I looked at you, and I saw their lie. And I forgot to see my son. I am so sorry. Leo, if I could take back that moment, I would. I would give anything to take it back. He looked away, back at the ducks. He was quiet for a long time. The hope that had flared in my chest began to die down, replaced by a cold dread. I had come here hoping for a miracle, for forgiveness. But maybe there was no forgiveness for a sin this great. I went to see Grandma, Leo said, his voice quiet again. He pulled a loose thread on the sleeve of his hoodie. She told me I have his eyes. David's. She always thought it was just a family resemblance. Now she can't stop seeing it. The simple statement carried so much weight. The innocent observations of the past had been weaponized. Ever you look just like your uncle was now a reminder of the lie. The world hadn't just changed for me. It had changed for everyone. She's heartbroken, I said, my own voice thick with guilt. About all of it. She's mad at you. Leo corrected me, his tone flat. She's mad at them, too. But she's really mad at you. For how you did it. He finally looked at me again. And his gaze was piercing. So am I? I think I get why you did it. I think, if I were you, I'd want to blow everything up, too. But you're my dad. You were supposed to protect me. And you threw me into the fire right alongside them. He was articulating the exact truth my mother had thrown at me. But hearing it from his lips was infinitely more painful. He understood my rage. But he couldn't forgive my methods. My betrayal wasn't the lie itself, but the public, cruel way I had chosen to reveal it. I had failed in my most basic duty as a parent, to put my child's well-being before my own feelings. I will never forgive myself for that. Leo, I said, and every word was laced with a painful sincerity. Never. I was a coward. I was so hurt. I wanted everyone else to hurt as much as I did. And that's no excuse. It was my job to protect you. And I failed. I broke your trust. He nodded slowly, accepting my confession without offering any comfort. Yeah, you did. We sat there as the afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the park. The air grew colder. A few families were packing up their things, their laughter and chatter a painful reminder of a life I no longer had. So what happens now? I asked, the question hanging in the cold air. It was the question that mattered most. What becomes of us? Leo was silent for a long time, watching a leaf float on the surface of the pond. I could see the internal struggle on his face. He was no longer just a kid. He was a young man who had been forced to confront the ugliest parts of adult life. In the span of a few days, he was grappling with love, betrayal, identity, and forgiveness all at once. I don't know, he said finally, and his honesty was brutal. Mom wants me to come home. She's Eric. She keeps calling, crying, apologizing, saying we can be a family again. And David? I asked, my voice tight. He texts every day, asking if I need anything, saying he wants to be there for me. I don't even know what that means. Leo let out a bitter little laugh. It's like I suddenly have 3 parents, and I don't want any of them. The word stung, but I knew I deserved them. In my attempt to reclaim my role as his true father, the father of his heart, I had inadvertently pushed him away from everyone. I had left him an orphan, surrounded by the very people who created him. I'm going to finish the school year living at Matt's, he said, his voice firmer now, as if he was solidifying a decision as he spoke. His parents said it's okay. I need space. From all of it. From the house. From Mom. From me, everyone. Okay, I said, my heart sinking. It was a reasonable decision. A mature one. But it felt like a door closing. Whatever you need. And after graduation, he continued, taking a deep breath, I'm not going to Michigan. Or Ohio State. This was a surprise. What? But you work so hard. Your applications. I'm going to take a year off, he said, looking out at the water. Not at me. I'm going to get a job. Save some money. Maybe travel a little. I need to figure things out. I need to figure out who I am now. Because I'm not Leo Miller, son of Mike Miller, from Maple Creek, Ohio, anymore. I don't know who that person is. The finality in his tone was devastating. He was untethering himself from the town, from the life that had been planned for him, from the identity that was now a lie. He was setting himself adrift, and I was the one who had cut the rope. He stood up, shoving his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. It was a signal that our meeting was over. I stood up, too, a desperate urge to reach out, to hug him, to fix this, rising in my chest. But I stayed still. The time for that was gone. I had lost that right. Leo, I started, my voice cracking. Please don't shut me out forever. Whatever you decide, whatever you do, I'm still your dad. I will always be your dad. And I love you. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger or pain in his eyes. It was a profound, bottomless sadness. It was the look of a boy mourning a life that he could never get back. I know, he said softly. The part of me that is still your son knows that. But the other part, the part of me that is his son, is so angry at you I can't breathe sometimes. I don't know how to make those 2 parts of me fit together. He shook his head, a look of deep weariness on his face. I need time. Dad. He called me Dad. The word was a lifeline. A tiny flicker of hope in the darkness. But it was followed by the stark reality of his next words. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did at that party. He said. And I don't know what our relationship will be. Maybe in a year. Maybe in 5 years. We can have a beer and talk about this like it's just a crazy story from our past. Or maybe we can't. I just don't know. And that was it. The open-ended conclusion. The question mark that would hang over the rest of my life. He hadn't slammed the door completely. But he hadn't opened it either. He had just left it slightly ajar. And told me to wait on the other side. Indefinitely. He turned to leave. Leo. Wait. I said. My voice desperate. He stopped but didn't turn around. Take care of yourself. I said. The words feeling hopelessly inadequate. He gave a slight nod. And then he walked away. I watched him go. His hooded figure getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared around a bend in the path. He didn't look back. I stood by the park bench for a long time. The cold seeping into my bones. The truth had set me free from the lie. But it had imprisoned me in a new reality, one of profound loss and uncertainty. I had won the battle. But I had lost the war. I had my truth. But I had lost my son. Or maybe I hadn't. Maybe. As he said. He just needed time. I got back in my truck and drove away from the park. With no real destination in mind. The sun had set. And the sky was a bruised purple. I drove past my old house. The lights were on. Sarah wasn't there. My mother was probably with her. 2 women. Bound by a shared grief. In a house that was no longer a home. I thought about David. My brother. The man whose weakness and selfishness had started this all. He was probably in his expensive condo. Drinking an expensive scotch. Drowning in a pathetic cocktail of guilt and relief. And I was here. Alone in my truck. Driving through the quiet streets of the life I had destroyed. I pulled over by the side of the road. Next to a vast, empty field under the rising moon. I got out and leaned against the cool metal of the truck. The wind whipping at my jacket. I looked up at the endless, indifferent sky, filled with stars that had been there long before my tiny, tragic story began and would be there long after it ended. Was love enough? Could 18 years of it outweigh one moment of brutal truth? Could a bond forged by skinned knees and bedtime stories and patient lessons in the driveway survive a revelation of blood? I didn't have the answers. No one did. The future was a blank page, and I didn't know if Leo would ever write my name on it again. All I could do was wait, and hope, and live with the echoing consequences of the day I gave my son the truth in a small, blue box.